Good evening, welcome to Auld Heids Speed Dial. This is our second episode with Mike Fennick and myself. We're going to do what we did last week, 7 minutes each, to bang on about what's been sort of happening this week. Over to you, Mike.
I've kind of suggested, Dave, that I'll go through this as fast as I can because I think you have more than a few things to say at the end of this. But let's just catch up on where I was last week. What I did was I started back in the early 1800s, at a time when Napoleon was at war with the UK, Scots regiments involved, and people in Edinburgh sat down and said, we're going to have to deal with the aftermath of this, with Scots soldiers dying, leaving wives and children behind. So they formed, what I'm stressing is a word, mutual. They formed a mutual company for the benefit of those people. So there's two words I'm going to use, mutual and follow the money. Follow the money will come at the end of what I'm going to say. Quickly, all during the 1800s, we watched companies being formed on that basis in Scotland. Scottish Provident, Scottish Mutual, Scottish Amicable. At the end of the century, coming into 1900, we had 9 mutual companies in Scotland, big companies, growing companies, all formed on the basis of mutuality, where you became a member and the benefits that accrued to the members. 1925, Standard Life, who had started off as a commercial company, saw all that and became a mutual company. So with those companies going through First World War, they grew. Through the depressions of the 30s, they grew. During the Second World War, they grew. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, they all maintained the membership that they had and they grew. 1990, Standard Life, which had demutualized, was now the largest mutual company in the whole of Europe. That was how things grew until mid-1980s. I'm picking the year 1986. There's a lot involved in this. If people want to find out more, just go onto Wikipedia and put in something called the Big Bang. But basically what happened was everything that had been in the rule book up until that day was thrown out. Banks who had been retail banks could become investment banks. Investment banks could become retail banks. Building societies, which used to populate most high streets, disappeared off the high streets. They were taken over. The two companies I'm going to focus on, Scottish Widows. Scottish Widows ceased to be a mutual company and was bought by Lloyds Bank. Standard Life started demutualizing and then tied up in a merger with something called Aberdeen Asset Management. Here's where we follow the money. I want you to think of all the money through all the generations over nearly 200 years that had put their faith and trust in mutual building societies and mutual life assurance companies, which started to disappear. This gross domestic profit product of Scotland, I want you to remember this figure when I talk through follow the money. It's 177 billion and maybe growing. Remember 177 billion. Lloyds decided that they wanted to take all the investments that people had previously in Scottish Widows and with Lloyds, an amount of £100 billion that they had control over. And they made an agreement with, guess who? Standard Life Aberdeen. And they said, would you look after all this money for us? And they formed an agreement. However, a few years later, Lloyds decided, we're not actually all that happy with this agreement. We're taking all the money back. Standard Life weren't happy. They had an agreement. So they took Lloyds Bank to a tribunal. The tribunal decided, no, you've breached the agreement. You'll need to give them back £35 billion. All of that is going on from a mutual position into this is people's money that they're moving about. It's not their money, it's other people's money. We've got to learn a lesson from that. I'll move on slightly because I'm going to divide this to allow you a wee bit more time, Dave. I'm going to move on to next week with where I want to go with what I'm talking about. There was an article in, I think it was probably the National, it's certainly in the National or the Herald, 2 articles side by side. One was saying that the Scottish National Investment Bank had made its first investment. It's up there. The other article said the majority of people in Scotland don't have enough money to last from one payday to the other payday. There's a huge gap going on in Scotland, and we've got to start addressing that. Now, some of the topics you'll see at the moment is we can have our own currency. Fine. We'll have our own reserve bank. Fine. I want to start from the bottom and connect it to the top. Should Scotland start talking about having a publicly owned, mutually run bank? And the place to learn whether that is a sensible idea or not is a good number of places, but the one I'm going to pick and talk about next week is Germany, where they have state-owned banks called Landesbanks, which are established for one purpose, to serve the public good. That's me over, Dave. Over to you, my friend.
Nice one, Mike. Right, well, basically, what I'd like to actually have I've got a few things I'd like to have a rant about today, but I noticed something really, really interesting that happened earlier on this week. Salmond finally put his head up. I know he's been turning up a couple of things he did somewhere with the 500. He also did a thing for Sean Connery, but he actually came out this week, made a policy statement along with Alec Neil. And this was a major policy statement, considering that he's not a member of a party. Basically, I'd like to go over some of the way, because if you look at this is a manifesto. And it makes you wonder exactly what's going to be happening with Alec when he's bringing out something like this. And would it be kind of convenient that Alec Neil's leaving the Parliament this year? Okay, talking about COVID. It's got a plan for minimising economic damage, calling for mass testing, reduced turnaround time, tackling the problem of super spreaders, identifying those who are most likely to require hospitalisation, and things like that. Now, these are all things that the Scottish Government are already working on. But it starts to get much more radical, as you would expect Alex Salmond to go. House building programme. Plan calls for a following creation of a national house building company, not private companies. At the minute, private companies, when they get planning permission for something, they have to build a certain percentage of affordable homes. Now, in Edinburgh, these affordable homes are almost all student accommodation. They're not for people that normally that are homeless or people that are on low incomes. They're for students. Because then they can rent them out for most of the year and then rent them out to tourists in the summer when they come over for the festival. So this national house building company is an absolutely brilliant idea for somebody that comes from a civil engineering background. Anyway, what they like to do is they like to build 10,000 new houses in Scotland over the next 5 years. All houses would be energy efficient, providing cost-effective heat for the occupants. It would maximise the number of apprentices and recruits and trains, and use its clout to be able to help develop and expand the indigenous construction industry in Scotland. You might have heard the term this week, shovel-ready projects. No, it's not about getting everybody in Scotland to dig a ditch for Boris Johnson. It's like shovel-ready projects for public infrastructure projects such as schools and hospitals is one of the quickest ways for government to create new jobs. The following types of projects should be included: new build and refurbishment projects, repair and maintenance projects, and projects in areas of high unemployment or deprivation. There will be a cash training programme to fill Scotland's skill gaps. At the moment, there's a shortage of 12,000 skilled construction workers, 5,000 long-distance lorry drivers, and an annual deficit of 7,000 IT graduates. These could be filled using this programme. Business expansion and investment. Zero interest rate loan scheme for businesses. Well, that's absolutely, I mean, considering all these businesses at the moment are being shut down because of COVID, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what tier they're going to be in next week or next month, etc., etc. when you're running your own business, you need to plan for the future. This helps you be able to do that, because at the end of the day, if you can borrow money on a zero rate, you can actually start to invest now for after COVID. Research and Development Fund. Well, you all know what Scotland have managed to develop. They've invented the modern world. Research and development, though, at the moment is basically, it's all going to foreign-based companies that are, that have got head offices in other countries that might have a wee research base in Scotland, if they're here at all. We've lost an awful lot of our own inventions to multinationals that could have benefited Scotland, and this would help that. Energy. Major energy producers, you know what we're doing with the renewables, with the tide energy, with the wind energy. At the moment, that used to be devolved, and then Westminster took it back. They renationalised. They took it back as soon as they realised there was some money in it. Because Scotland now produces enough power for its own needs, and it's likely to be able to provide 25% of Europe's green power over the next 25 years. And a Scottish National Renewal Corporation to be set up. It would transform Scotland's prospect for post-coronavirus economic recovery and avoid massive unemployment. These are things that have been put together by a guy without a party and a guy who's leaving the SNP in May. I think it sounds like a manifesto, and I'm looking forward to seeing Alex Salmond coming back into frontline policies soon and putting out radical policies like that, and I'll be the first person to sign up for when that happens. Now, let's go on to Alec Neil, who's all part of this. Alec Neil has recently called for a judge-led inquiry to take over from the absolute travesty of what's happening with the parliamentary inquiry and harassment in Hollywood at the moment. Basically, they're fighting over, oh, we can't release this line of this email, etc., etc. Well, let me tell you this. Peter Murrell has been called in front of the inquiry on Tuesday to give face-to-face evidence. Peter Murrell's already been caught out. His first written submission didn't mention the leaked WhatsApp thing that came out that Kenny McCaskill was sent anonymously. He then had to reply to that and said, "Oh, I just said in the spur of the moment." What Peter Murrell doesn't know is that there are a lot more of these messages because they came out in the court. Alec tried to actually introduce some of the evidence, so it wasn't just a wee one-off. There are loads of them. Peter Murrell's going to come up this Tuesday, and I hope that Jackie Bailey and that can actually tie him down to lying because he's under oath, it's perjury, and it's time the man was gone. That's it as far as that. And now I'm going to get on to something that happened last night. 2 months ago, I heard something from someone that there was a plan in the air to do an awards scheme for the best of yes. Well, the best of yes. Let that settle in. The best of yes. Do we have a best in the yes movement? No, we don't. The yes movement is a group of people working together. There is no me. There is no you. We're a we. And at the end of the day, when you put up an award with £1,500 cash for the best yeser in the yes movement and £1,000 for the best yes group, then all you're going to do is sow division. And I said that 2 months ago when I first heard the idea, and then it came out last night on the front page of the National. I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, honestly, is there anything that you could think that would be any more divisive? I mean, I would be quite happy to go with this if it was to do with people who had died on their feet in the front line with their eyes on the prize and they never got to see independence. But at the end of the day, you don't get to be in the history books unless you've made history. and we've not made it yet. And this is an absolutely ridiculous, divisive thing. And whoever is behind it should give themselves a shake. I'm afraid I've just shot over my 7.5 minutes. I will be interested in any comments you've got afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Talk to you later, guys.
Bye-bye, folks.